Welcome back. Well, entrepreneur technology hubs are becoming incredibly popular in South Africa as we try to stimulate small businesses and make use of technology to level the playing field that's between big and small business. We'll be looking at some of the initiatives reshaping South Africa and how big international corporates are doing their bit to support local entrepreneurs. We're joined at the desk by Jessica Hubbard from FinWeek, Nteto Nyati, Director at Microsoft, and Tabane Kupe, Corporate Affairs Lead for Intel Sub-Saharan Africa. Welcome to all of you. And Nteto, I'll start with you, of course, coming from Microsoft. Are you focused on being able to provide the technology, perhaps even the expertise for technology hubs right now?
Indeed. In fact, if you look at about 2 weeks ago, we announced an initiative within Microsoft called For Africa. The essence of that initiative is about supporting startup companies. So what we have seen is that in South Africa, it's one thing to put together an infrastructure, but if you do not work and support those businesses, it's not going to work, or the chances of success are not going to be that high. So for us, we've decided to partner and work and alongside with these small businesses.
Mm-hmm. And I know Intel also, of course, provides cheap laptops in Africa, but tell us about, from the technology hub's perspective, what you're doing right now.
Currently in Africa, we have a few initiatives that we are starting up, one which will be in South Africa, around the support of iHubs. We are not going to be looking at creating iHubs, rather supporting the existing iHubs that are currently mushroom around the continent. One thing that is becoming eminent is that these iHubs provide a place where we have these potential entrepreneurs, these innovators coming together and co-sharing and co-creating together. And Intel and corporates like Intel and Microsoft are coming in to bring in the right technology, the methodologies, the scientific processes that we use in our fabs for, to enable the young innovators.
Just entrepreneurs to be able to use that same
to use
type
that
of,
and have access, yes, as well as access to experts that we have within our corporate.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I find quite interesting, often you look at big corporates and it almost seems counterintuitive that they would support entrepreneurs. Yes, it sounds good and makes for good sort of PR, but there does seem to be a change in the last couple of years that they genuinely do want to support these technology hubs. They do get things out of it. These small businesses they're not just nice to support, they actually are supporting more of an ecosystem, if you want, for that's collaborative. And I think what's changed that mindset in the last couple of years?
I think if you look at a Microsoft situation, if you look at us, we look at it this way. If we do not have a thriving ecosystem of technologies, of people developing technologies around different platforms, some our platform, some competitor platforms, it's not going to be good for all of us in the IT environment. So we have felt that we need to do our bit, but our focus is largely to say, we've got here young people passionate about this continent, and they understand deeply the problems of Africa. And they want to come up with solutions to address those problems.
Yeah.
We want to be able to help them to come up with those solutions.
I mean, fascinating stories to hear coming out of Kenya when it comes to technology that's been developed there for specific farmers in the poultry industry,
Yes.
Just really interesting technologies that continue to come out of that. But if we're talking about South Africa, you've got the Innovation Hub here in Johannesburg. It talks about being a catalyst for the Gauteng province. We have other, innovation hubs more coming to the fore, but do you think they've been successful?
I don't think they've achieved their full potential as of yet, perhaps because they're still very new, and perhaps because they're lacking the funding and the network to make it happen. And I think with the involvement of companies such as Microsoft, Intel, Google's involved in a few, we can start getting it off the ground, but I don't think we've seen anything near the success of, say, the iHub in Kenya. Perhaps because our entrepreneurs are still developing their ideas, perhaps because they're not tapping into the networks effectively enough thus far. But we are seeing some promising initiatives coming out of some of them. There's an initiative in the Cape called 88 miles per hour, which is backed by Google. They've just taken on 9 entrepreneurs and they look promising from the outset. But so far, I don't think we've seen anything solid coming out of them.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a reason for them to exist. And I mean, like I say, I think it's often these things get created for the sake of just it sounds good.
Yeah.
It looks really cool. We're supporting entrepreneurs, rah, rah, rah. But there are very cool projects that do happen. Globally, there's kind of the smart city concept that's going around. I think you'll probably see that Microsoft, Intel, IBM, they're all trying to get involved in this idea of hyper-local apps that make the difference for South African entrepreneurs. So, I mean, you see things like the Pothole Brigade, for instance. I mean, you can have a really cool app to say there's potholes, can we get them fixed?
Yeah.
That's a South African
Someone in
problem.
New York sitting at a computer is not going to understand the problems that we have here in Johannesburg.
Correct,
is it?
and that's where the hyperlocality, I think, comes in, is that you can actually, and you can build big apps. Like I think often we have this idea that we can't build big technology in South Africa because we have to export it to the rest of the world, and we'll kind of look at the success things that come out of Kenya. But there are actually very cool things we can do that, but there's got to be a reason for them existing. That there's a reason for the product, there's a reason for the hub, and there's a reason for the entrepreneur, and they kind of have to merge together. And those kind of things then have the benefits to the bigger corporates because it creates demand for their product. And I mean, remember, if you look in South Africa and rest of Africa, we're a growing economy. We're still a low tech but growing economy. So there's going to be demand for. There's a place for corporates and there's a place for the smaller, more nimble entrepreneurs.
How is the model when it comes to technology hubs, innovation hubs, changing here in South Africa to become more effective?
I think we have to look at it as in context of entrepreneurship as a lifelong process, starting from initially when early childhood. If you look at what are the activities that we are doing during early childhood that encourage innovation. For example, if you look your ESCOM Young Scientist Fairs, your Intel Science and Engineering fairs, that actually encourage nature and amplify some of these activities by young innovators and inventors. And then that process then feeds into the iHubs, which is the next stage of innovation. Then the iHubs then bring together these kind of entrepreneurs. And in fact, actually, there's a tendency to focus on one kind of entrepreneur, the one that actually, at the end of the day, establishes the startup. Yet there are two key types of entrepreneurs. Your inventors and designers, who then take the route of going through technology licensing, technology commercialization. On the other end, we have your conventional ones that then go into startups. But with these iHubs, you then have these two working together and actually co-creating together. And then this gives them an opportunity for a match made in heaven, because this is where they can then partner for a startup using the other one from a designer perspective and the other one from a business perspective.
I think that's a great point, that we don't yet have a strong culture of innovation in South Africa, and there's still very much a risk-averse attitude to entrepreneurship. So perhaps that's where hubs can play as a good role, is in fostering that culture, developing a strong community where you're allowed to fail, where you're allowed to try.
And you've got
And
like-minded people.
you've got that network of support and showing you that failure is okay, but it's important to try.
Is there mentoring that takes place?
Yes, maybe just to touch on the last point.
Yeah.
One of the things that we typically do is to start in the institutions of higher learning. That's where we start to help and partner with these young students there and encourage them to come up with solutions. And as they move out of those programs, they move into the innovation kind of hub projects that we have, and we are mentoring those guys, showing them the best ways, the best practice, so that they do not, have to reinvent the wheel. And once they graduate out of that, as my colleague here, Tabane, said, we put them into other programs. That's the kind of a support structure that one needs in order to help and encourage innovation in our country.
Do you get the sense that government, I mean, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's a lot of talk about supporting innovation, supporting entrepreneurship. We're poor at math, we're poor at science and that kind of thing. But I look at the universities. We have very, very good universities in South Africa, but we really battle to move the smart technology they develop there into, and I know that there's sort of IP related issues as well, but just how do you get the sense that government's doing enough to kind of facilitate that ecosystem?
I think what we need the most is to have those institutions of higher learning to be open up open themselves up to partnerships.
Yep.
You know, partnerships with private sector. That is what is going to turn the needle, really. Whether it is government that they need permission from, I don't necessarily think so, because they are largely independent institutions. They can set the course on their own. They just need to be open up to partnerships. And those partnerships will certainly help move in the right direction.
But aren't a couple of these hubs, including your hub, SME for Africa, aren't they partnering with government? in many ways?
We are, for example, we are partnering with University of Witwatersrand. That's one side of things. On the other side, we're working with CEDA, and we're also working with National Small Business Chamber. But for me, it's those kind of partnerships that will really help us to move in the right direction.
Is this the best way to go about fostering innovation? I mean, what is the cost of the failures that you get and the people who come and sit at a workspace and don't necessarily ever develop anything or necessarily ever start a business?
I think one good thing about the Innovation Hub is that it gives these young innovators an opportunity to actually launch fast, learn fast, fail fast, and scale fast. I think we need to shy away from failure and looking down upon
And
failure.
looking at that cost as an issue.
Because if we're always looking at the cost, can you imagine that today we'll still not be flying around because someone is looking and saying flying is a costly business. There's a lot of inventions that would have never seen the light. The computer used to fill a whole room. It would have never seen the light of the day that now we have our personal laptops. So if we shy away from cost and say, look at what is we are only getting 1% or 2% in terms of the output. But all in good time, as we go down the value chain to early childhood, to stimulate people to start maths and sciences and the engineering, coming up all the way to your iHubs, and then connecting them and amplifying, then we will start realizing the return on that investment.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a fun question as well. I mean, if you look at these iHubs, who should be populating them? Because I think, again, I come back to the point that it makes for good, that it maybe sounds a bit of a facetious comment, but to take kids out of the townships, and they're already behind the curve for a lot in terms of education, and then it sounds good to say that they are being sort of educated and they're being given computer skills and that kind of thing, but is there not the value in targeting sort of the higher institutions and the guys that are already well advanced and developed a lot of those skills?
Skills, yeah.
I think sometimes we go out and look at what is happening elsewhere, and we just bring those concepts here without necessarily looking at what are the challenges that are facing us, whether that solution will, without adaptation, will just work fine here in South Africa. I think in South Africa we've got a different challenge. We've got young people who want to do things but may not have the right kind of skills to start up doing things. So that intervention requires partnerships, and to go and set up an infrastructure there and then think that people are just going to go there is very likely that it's not going to be fully utilized. We need to have those partnerships working together in universities, encouraging people to do things.
And I think in this regard, corporations such as Microsoft and Intel and Google, they're leading the way, because they used to come to Africa or wherever and operate in isolation and have all of these programs in isolation. But more and more, we're seeing them working together, because they're realizing that if they can combine resources and channel them together, the outcomes are much more effective and much more positive. So we can take a leaf out of their books and sort of combine our resources as a country from all sectors.